Welcome, everybody, to our very first, I think this is our very first live launch party. I'm Elisa,
Yeah.
Content Marketing Manager at Tailwind, and I am joined by Steven, Superfly Steven. He's been working very hard on something for all of you guys, so I'm happy that you're here to talk about it today. So you are, Steven, who are you?
Who am I? What an important question to ask.
It's deep, right? Start off deep.
Yeah. As you know, like Tailwind's not a very large company. So I joined 4 years ago, right when we were just launching our first Pinterest scheduling tool, which all of you guys use now. And over the last like a couple of years, I've played a part in helping to launch Tribes. I've helped launch our Instagram product, and now I'm really happy to announce that we're launching our new Smart Loop product. So I basically worked on every product that we have at Tailwind, and I guess like technically my role is called product manager, but many of you probably know me from all our one-on-one conversations. Anytime we launch a product, we do hundreds of calls with our community members just to understand more of what it's like to be you guys, what it's like to run businesses, and I really put ourselves in your shoes just so that we can help make your lives easier as we build these products. So that's sort of what I do. Like I try and figure out what problems are most important for all of you, and then we help build them into Tailwind.
Yeah, so Smart Loop, from what I understand, is our most requested feature ever.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
by far.
What? Okay, so just give me a one sentence explanation of what Smart Loop is. We'll get into it more in a minute.
One sentence. Wow. Okay.
One sentence, that's it.
Well, like ultimately, Smart Loop is meant to help you take some of your best content and reshare them out to Pinterest for you. So if you've ever used our pin scheduling tool, if you've ever used interval pinning, this is a way for you to take that same content in the same places that you were going to reshare it, and then also and not have to come back into Tailwind to actually manually do that every so often.
Oh, so when people have been requesting this, like how are they asking for it?
Yeah. So I think like as I mentioned before, like a big part of us building product here at Tailwind is talking to our community, our members, and
Hmm.
so many members would actually do calls with me, and they'd say, "Hey, Steven, like I asked them like, what's your Pinterest strategy?" And they pull up this giant spreadsheet of like, here's like hundreds and hundreds of pieces of my blog posts and content over time. Here are all the boards that I share them to. Here's when we last share them, and like I want to make sure that I'm constantly getting my best content out there and getting
Hmm.
driving traffic back to my website. But then I also don't want to overshare my content. And so I have this spreadsheet that helps me remember everything. And it would be so awesome if I didn't have to have this spreadsheet. So that's sort of how Smart Loop sort of spawned, is from this idea that we want to help you reshare all this content without all the hassle of remembering to share it, when to share it, how often to share it, and also even which pieces of content you should be sharing.
You know, I have a massive respect for people who build those spreadsheets and actually follow through. I,
Yes.
I made one, but I think I only went to it maybe 4 or 5 times before I decided, this is ridiculous. It's too much work. I'd rather be creating content than trying to remember to reshare my content. We have something from Carissa White. She says, Smart Loop helped me reach my 1 million impression goals, plus
Wow.
a large increase in website traffic. That's amazing, Carissa. We would love to talk to you more about that. Send us a note, elisa@tailwindapp.com. That's impressive. Good for you. Good for you.
Yeah, and
All
like
right.
I think like Carissa also points out something really important about this is that
Mhm.
um, a lot of people know that resharing your content, so especially beyond just sharing it the first time that you make it, is a great way to get more value out of every piece of content you create. Like you spend so much time taking photos of your content, getting a pin ready, writing the best description, and then only sharing it one time really doesn't do it justice. Like you want to get some of your best content out there. If you know that your audience is engaged with it, you want to get it out there again, get more traffic back to your site for the work that you've already put into creating that content.
Yeah, excellent. Well, Malika is ready to learn to loop.
All right.
Steven, as part of our excitement in launching Smart Loop, we had this idea that it would be fun to do a little hula hooping, do some videos, some contests. So how did it go up in New York?
So we had a couple people who hooped. I
Yeah.
personally only made it to 4 seconds.
Okay.
But then I think we had a couple professional hula hoopers on our team, and like
Oh.
yeah. Unfortunately, it was not me, and I had to step away.
Hmm. Yeah, I have to say that mine went flying more times than I can count. The cats were scattering, belongings were all over the room, and I decided to take it outside.
Yeah.
But when I finally made my video, I made it. I had to do hand spinning because that was all I could do with holding my phone because I wanted to make the point that Smart Loop is something that you can do without thinking about. It makes your pins smart so they go out at the right times for engagement with your followers. So, the hoop is just spinning on my hand and I'm pinning on my phone because once you get Smart Loop set up, right, you don't really have to think about it too much. There are ways to optimize and we'll talk about that too, but the time that you can save and the way that it means that you're always an active pinner, right? So if life gets in the way, which it often does, or you're on vacation and you didn't have time leading up to it to schedule your pins, you never really have to worry about your queue being empty. I
Yeah,
love
it's an excellent point. Once you get your content to Smart Loop, you should definitely check in every so often. But all that time you spent manually resharing, like the hours that you put in on the weekend right before bed, those hours now you can spend with your family. You can spend creating content. I'm sure there's so many different ways you can use that time that you saved in.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So I did let you say a bit more than one sentence about what Smart Loop is.
Yeah.
But I think we can talk a little bit more about that. So Malika mentioned that it's driving not just impressions on Pinterest, which, we always like to see our reach going up, but what really matters, what really means paying the bills, right, is that traffic to your website. So what kind of guidelines did you look at when it came to how to create Smart Loop?
Sure. So I think part of what we really wanted to do here, so I guess for some context, we've been working on Smart Loop for just about 2 years now. And at
Mm,
the very beginning, like the first version of our product that we showed maybe a handful of users, all it did was basically take some of your interval pins and repost them out there. And so it was a basic way for you to loop, basically.
yeah,
And I think part of like why it took so long from then until now is that
3 years,
uh,
yeah.
yeah, we want to. I think, and this is like a little bit of harping on our mission here, but like it's really about taking some of these best practices that we've seen other people spend hours and hours every week, like figuring out and make those accessible in like a couple clicks. And so when you think about resharing, sure, you can think about it as I have an interval pin, I just want that to repeat, and we've heard that many times. Like, why can't I have it just have a button on every interval pin that says just repeat this? And I think part of like figuring all this out is that there's so much more to it. So like if you want to go with this concept that we're calling intentional resharing, there's so much to it. You have to choose pins that have your audience is engaged with. You have to choose when to best share that. You also choose which boards you want it to go out to, and even like the time of year if you want to share like some of your seasonal content. And so all those decisions go into like how to actually reshare intentionally onto Pinterest. And that's a core concept that we actually work directly with Pinterest on is like, we don't want to just have something where people can leave it on autopilot. We want to make sure that you can pin almost like organically and have like a natural cadence of your pins without making it look like you're just posting the exact same stuff over and over again. So that's part of why it took so long for us to get to where we are. And that's also partly why we call it Smart Loop, is because like we've built in all these really great features that now you can access like all these best practices in just a couple of clicks.
Right. So it really illustrates well the core best practices of Pinterest, right? So choosing pins that your followers engage with, so important because Pinterest looks at that. When your pin goes out, it looks at how your followers engage, whether they do or not will influence how much your pin is distributed. Then you said, what was the next one? What boards it should go to.
Yep.
So it's going to go to boards that are relevant to that content. Super important.
Yep.
When it goes out, it should go out when your followers are most likely to engage so you can get that signal to your people. And I think there's a fourth one. What was that? the pin, the board, the timing.
Yeah, even just like I mentioned seasonality earlier.
Yeah,
So
that's the other one.
yeah, like there's some content that you can have going out to your audience all year round because
Mm-hmm.
it's like a great chicken dinner recipe is probably great all year round. But things like Christmas decorations, like you probably want to choose only like the certain times of year. I know some people are really crazy about Christmas, but you want to choose like those months leading up to Christmas as the best times to share that content, and we do that automatically for you.
Excellent. I love that. So, I mean, this is our launch party. Uh, but a lot of people have been using SmartLoop for a while. So what does this actually mean?
Sure. So we actually, and this is similar to any product that we build here at Tailwind. There's part of the 2 years is not us just hunkering down in a room and like writing code. It's really just let's get product in front of our customers as often as possible, get as much feedback as possible, and really understand like what's working and what's not. And so part of doing that was introducing the product to people in what we call the private beta. So essentially inviting people to take part in testing our product, giving us good amounts of feedback around how they were using it, like what worked for them, what didn't work for them, and then taking that feedback and changing our product to work that way. So we've been in private beta for a long time. Actually, a lot of people filled out our survey on our website in the Tailwind dashboard just to get early access to our product. And all those people are now in the product now. And we have tons and tons of people using it, which is great. But we also want to open it up to the larger Tailwind audience. So like we had a lot of people register for a survey. They're all in the product now, but now we're ready for the wider Tailwind audience to also have access, which is why we're having a launch party today.
Hey, that's very exciting. So, Stephen, big question. Is this free?
There's certainly a free trial. So we are offering for you to manage what we're calling active SmartLoop posts, and we're throwing in 250 of those in every Plus plan that's available for Tailwind members. And so 250 active SmartLoop posts will allow you to really get started with some of your top content and really see what the product is like. And that's included in your Plus plan. It's also available on your free trial as part of your 100 scheduled pins that you have. And the best way to think about like what a SmartLoop post is it's almost like here's like a library of content. Here's content that you've hand selected as being great to reshare with your audience. We're going to take that and put it into SmartLoop for you, and we'll actively manage it. We'll actively reshare it for you. So one active SmartLoop post is considered one pin to one board. So if you have a pin in SmartLoop that's looping to 10 boards, we count that as 10 active posts. And then it doesn't matter how often it pins every month. If it pins one time, if it pins 30 times, it will always count as 10 active posts. So 250 are available for free as part of your Plus plan. And then we also have paid tiers for additional posts starting at $5 per month.
Okay. So when you're on the Plus plan and you have the 250 posts, that's not a trial. That's something that you keep with you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So like you can add in, for example, 25 pins going out to 10 boards, and we'll help you recirculate that over time. And that will always be included in your plan.
Oh, that's cool. All right. I want to put you on the spot a little bit here so that people can kind of get a picture of how you've developed this. What is the best feature you've added because of customer feedback?
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
You can say your favorite, so it can be a little subjective.
Yeah, so one of the most favorite features we put in is really this whole notion of like figuring out how often you should reshare your content. Because like I think it's a really important decision because it's easy to share your pin way too much. And again, like Pinterest is starting to send signals that like if you're sharing the same content over and over again without engagement, then it's not great for the reach of your overall account. And we really want to make sure that as you're sharing this content, you can figure out, originally people were trying to figure out like, oh, how often should I pin this? Should I pin it one time a day, like from my loop, or should I pin 5 times a day? And we sort of took all that decision making and took like the best practices that Pinterest suggested to us and built it directly into the product. So in one click, you just choose your content, and then we'll tell you, here are recommendations. Here are 2 recommendations that we are giving you on how often you should reshare. And all you have to do is click one of them, click go ahead and create your loop. And then we actually generate an entire schedule for you of how often to share. And we also use our the same like optimized time slots that you're used to when you pin regularly as well.
Cool. I think my favorite feature is kind of related, but it's the analytics.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you look at your smart loop, it will tell you how many repins per pin your whole loop gets. And then you can look at each individual pin and you can see how often it's gone out, how often it's going to go out in the next time period. But the thing I really look at is how many repins per pin that one gets. And my rule for myself, you can do whatever works for you, but I take that average. And if a pin falls below that average, I either want to figure out why or I throw it out of the loop.
Yep, it's a good way to think about it.
To me, it is the easiest of all analytics. And I would much rather use Smart Loop analytics than any other analytics I've looked at as far as how this one pin is actually performing. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. And like it's easy to reshare your content over time, and that results in like multiple pins over time. And what we've done in Smart Loop is actually consolidate that all into one place. So you can come into Smart Loop, look for that one apple pie recipe, see like it's been pinned 10 times, and out of the 10 times it's been posted, here are the results. And so like you can go to one place, look at the results in an easy format, and then decide like, oh, do I want to keep looping this, or do I want to maybe adjust the description? Maybe I can change up the image because like Christmas is coming up, and maybe I can throw some extra festive decorations on my pin or in my description. There's many ways for you to update the content as well. And so you're not always just pinning the exact same content over and over again.
Cool. So we've talked about what we like about it. Some of our members are chiming in here, which is wonderful. Paula says that she's using it and loves it so much. She's been using Smart Loop about a month, and her traffic has already increased dramatically. I'm thrilled with it and have bought a yearly plan. Thank you. That's wonderful.
Amazing.
Hear that. Yeah. What other kinds of feedback are you hearing from members who are trying it?
Yeah, so I think like if you're used to using interval pinning, if you're one of those people that was using a spreadsheet and like you really had like a good system organized around it, like this is meant to save you time. Like you had that spreadsheet, you were sitting down on Sunday evenings and planning out your next couple of weeks worth of posts, or next couple of months worth of posts in some cases, and now all that just goes away. So all that time you spent manually doing that can now be put into Smart Loop, and it automatically recirculates for you on your behalf. So if you're interval pinning, this is a great way for you to be more consistent with that. So I think one of the big pieces of feedback was, I'm sharing my content out there, but sometimes I forget to reshare it. So like you might remember like a couple months from now and say, oh, I forgot to reshare that piece of content. But with Smart Loop, you never forget. So I think if you're used to using interval pinning, then this is a great way for you to continue saving time. And I think for other users that have not, or like other members that we have that have never reshared some of their content before, this is a great way for you to get started. It's an easy way for you to not have to set up those spreadsheets. You can just choose some of your best pieces of content, put it into Smart Loop, and we'll choose all the best options for you to get started. So from that perspective, you can start driving a lot more traffic to your website by taking your content and resharing it out there.
That's awesome. Okay, so let's say I have Tailwind Plus, and let's say I have a Tribes power up. Now I need to add a Smart Loop power up if I want more than 250 posts. Now I've got these 3 different things going on. What can you do for me?
Great question. So I think as we were making Smart Loop, and again, like part of why we have a private beta is like we also reflect around pricing. So like an important part of us building product is to basically ask our members like what are reasonable prices, and like what are things that would help benefit you. Obviously you're saving time, you're getting more traffic to your site, like how can we price this so that it works for you guys? And so like I think as people, as you're mentioning, like, a lot of people are engaging a lot with our products. So using Tribes, they're scheduling their pins, and now we also have Smart Loop, and we really wanted to introduce a new bundle so that there's ways for people to get the most of all our products at the same time. And so we're starting off right now with a new unlimited power-up bundle, and that includes both your Plus plan, and includes unlimited Tribes, and it also includes unlimited Smart Loop on a $40 per month plan, paid annually.
Excellent. All right. So how does that compare to paying for everything separate? Did you say that?
Yeah, yeah, great question. So, the reason why we introduced this is because, like, if, for example, you pay monthly for Tailwind, the exact same power-ups would be 45 for Tribes, 45 for Smart Loop, and then 15 for Plus. And it was really, that was like, we weren't expecting people to ever get up to that price point because that's a really big price point. And so part of building this was to make sure that there is an accessible price point for people to get the most of all our tools together. And so that would have originally cost $105 per month, but now it's available for 40 a month.
That's a good deal. I like bargains. Thank you. So, any last overall thoughts before we have so many questions? I think we better move to the questions pretty quick. But do you have anything else you want people to know?
No, really excited to hear some of your questions and really dive deeper on like how we can help you guys get started.
All right, we have a yay for the bundle from Jana. Yay! Okay, so we want to bring in Molly. And here she comes. Here she comes, Molly.
Hi.
Hey, Molly.
Hi. Hey, Molly.
Molly. Molly is our customer success Smart Loop diva. She has taken on the challenge of explaining all things Smart Loop to all of our members and to all of us as they come up. So we really couldn't do this without you. So thank you for being here, Molly.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I'm sure if you in the audience here have had questions about Smart Loop, you have heard from Molly. So we thought we'd bring her on. You could ask her right here, put her on the spot because she knows the answers. So before we go into individual questions, we had a couple of questions that seemed to keep coming up that we thought we might cover just for everybody's information. So the first one that Molly picked was, what is the difference between your general queue, so like your smart schedule, and the Smart Loop queue? So why does this come up?
So this is coming up for a few different reasons. So one of them is people that tend to be kind of startled when they see that when they add Smart Loop, it adds a lot of time slots to their queue. So I wanted to point out that these are actually separate queues. So your general queue that you're used to adding things to, just your regular Tailwind schedule, is separate from your Smart Loop queue. So if you're in your calendar view, anything that has a little colorful bubble on it with a little loop, that's a Smart Loop time slot. And that's totally separate from your general queue. And that's important for a couple of reasons. One of them being board rules. So if you've been using Smart Loop, you know that you can set up board rules that apply to all of your loops so that you don't post too many times in, let's say, a group board that has a lot of rules. So those board rules only apply to pins that are in your Smart Loop queue, but not pins that are in your general queue. So that's one of the reasons it's been coming up. Yeah.
Okay. So if I had 15 pins a day in my smart schedule, and then I start a loop that pins 2 times a day, now I have 2 extra slots.
Exactly right.
I understand.
Yeah. And another thing to point out is that you can actually get really granular with how many time slots are in your schedule. So if for some reason you really only want 10 pins total to go out per day, you can go into your schedule manager and your dashboard, and you can edit every schedule to where you only have 10 total time slots a day.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right. So, and I've seen this, Molly. So sometimes I set up a Smart Loop and I have these empty slots now in my schedule with these little circle, little colored bubbles. Why does that happen? Did I do something wrong?
So no, you didn't do anything wrong. No worries. So in most cases, nothing is wrong at all. What's happening is that Smart Loop is just following the rules that you set up for that loop. I know it's a little jarring to see all those empty time slots, but there's nothing to worry about. We're probably just following the settings that are set up in that loop. But if you're still curious and you really want to see like why all these empty time slots are appearing, or if you're kind of like wanting to make your pins publish more frequently, there's a couple of things that could be causing this. One of them is board rules. So let's say this can happen especially in examples where you have the same board in multiple loops. But if you have a board rule to only pin to a certain board once a day and another loop has already pinned to that board, for example, then that's going to cause some spacing issues or maybe some empty time slots. Another thing to look at is basically just how many pins and how many boards are in your loops versus how many time slots are in your loop. So when people reach out about this question, there's unfortunately not like a really easy prescription I can just give to everyone because it's very individualized. But looking at how many pins are in your loop, how many boards are in your loop, and then your time slots, and then also like your frequency settings. So if you go to edit your loop and then click schedule and then click your advanced settings, you'll see frequency settings here. And sometimes this is just pretty high. Oftentimes that's just what we're suggesting to you. But if you lower that down, that might fill in some of those empty time slots too.
Okay, so lower that down or add more pins.
Exactly. Yes, adding more pins too. That'll fill them up.
Okay, good. I like adding more pins. All right. So I shared a link to the Smart Loop FAQ, which Molly has been working on. It's a bit.ly link that goes to a Smart Loop FAQ if you want to check that out. Because I know we broke it down in the FAQ, right? So here's what might be happening. Here's what to go to check. So you can kind of do a little sleuthing on your own if you like.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So this one, when you mentioned this to me, I did not understand the question. So we're going to have to explain the question first. Does Smart Loop delete duplicate pins? Why does that question come up?
So that comes up a lot. People tend to have a worry about, okay, well, if this is looping, that means that the same pin is going to end up on the same board at some point or multiple times. And that kind of causes some concern. So I think that's why it's coming up often. I know other tools are known to like go in and remove duplicate pins, but as an official Pinterest partner, Tailwind doesn't have the ability to actually remove pins from your boards. And I know you've written a lot about this for blog posts, and we've talked to Sarah from Pinterest about this a lot, but that's not a bad.
Uh-oh. Oh, she froze.
Oh, no.
All right, Molly, come on back in. Okay. Yeah, so it's not a bad thing.
Yeah, I can continue her thought. It's I think part of working with Pinterest is really understanding like what this, again, like this concept of like intentional resharing. Like if you're resharing at a good frequency, you're never gonna go to your board and see like 10 of the same pin on the same on your board at the exact same time. Oh, Molly's back.
Yeah, you even are so in sync that he finished your sentence for you.
Thank you, Steven.
No worries. Yeah, so like we intentionally do not delete pins because ultimately if you reshare at good frequencies, then it's never going to be a problem. And ultimately, if you have, like Pinterest always recommends that if you leave pins on your boards, they can eventually also get found as well. So it's not about just like, oh, they didn't do well in the first week, and so like maybe I shouldn't leave them there. Pinterest is one of those search engines that sometimes like content takes a long time to actually surface, but when it does, like you'll see your pins take off, and you don't want to eliminate that opportunity.
Right. So I guess when I first saw the question, I thought, well, when you add pins to your Smart Loop, which is an incredibly easy process, so you can sort by one board and then tell it just only show pins from my website, which is great because that's probably mostly what you're going to want to loop. Then you can sort it by most popular. So, but if I had duplicate pins of that same content in that same board and I accidentally selected it more than once, does it take it out, the loop?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So if you're importing a bunch of pins at once and we see a duplicate, we'll just filter those out for you.
Okay, great. Now I saw a question somewhere and I don't know if I'm going to be able to find it because there are a lot of questions here. But it was a question about sharing duplicate pins to the same content in your loop. And I know some people wonder, is that okay? What do we think about that?
Sorry, could you duplicate pins of the same content?
Well, it would be the same URL, but it would be different images, different descriptions, maybe different hashtags. How do we feel about that?
So as far as I can tell, that's something that people are definitely doing with Smart Loop. Sorry, guys, I need to refresh again.
Okay, that's all right.
No worries. So I guess to continue her thought, she was sending me telepathic thoughts on that. So like, yeah, we absolutely want you to use Smart Loop in that way. And actually a way that people have been using it is to almost run like an A/B test of their pins. So you might have a blog post that comes out with 5 potential images that you could share on Pinterest. And so Smart Loop, you can actually load those 5, have them loop to your boards over time, and you can actually pick a winner. So you can look at the stats on each of the pins and see like, oh, this angle of this shot and this description is like the winner out of all those 5 pins. And so I can keep this one and then remove the ones that are not working.
Excellent. Yeah. And we had a question about, well, how long do you wait before you decide to remove one? I kind of struggle with this as well. Like, how many times do you want it to go out before you decide, oh, it's not performing? I give it maybe a couple, maybe once through the loop. And if it doesn't do real well, depending on how many boards there are on it, I'll either take it out or I'll create a new pin for the same image, the same content, new image, new description, new hashtags, and see if that can do better. Because I think over time too, the same image, maybe people get used to seeing it. It doesn't perform as well. It could start to, even if it started good, it might not be over time. Any other thoughts on how to improve your loops over time?
Yeah, like I think it's about formulating some theories around like why you think it's not working. So like you might pin it one time through the loop and you might see like, oh, like people didn't engage with this as much as I thought they would. But maybe these particular boards are showing that people are liking it and all these other boards are not working. And so you might then do a little sleuthing and say like, oh, the boards that I was doing on, this is like the type of audience there. This is the other type of content that does well. And you might be able to reframe your content. So you might be able to maybe write some new text and overlay that over your image, or you might be able to write a new description to like cater to that new audience. So I think it's about like thinking about like, how can I change this up? And then maybe at some point you decide like, I'm sort of out of ideas here. Maybe this piece of content didn't do as well as I thought, and that's totally fine. And you can make room in your loop for other pins.
Okay, cool. Now, as far as what content you pin, like you can pin other people's content if you want to. Are you seeing people do that?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Molly, you were saying something?
No, I was just gonna say, yeah. I think it's pretty rare since there are limits in Smart Loop. I think most of the time people are only pinning their own content, but I definitely have seen people pinning others as well, especially if it's really high quality stuff that's relevant to their audience.
That's a nice thing to do for somebody. If they mention you, say something nice about you, that would be a great one to Okay. Let's see. Is there going to be a replay? Yes, there will be a replay. You can come back to the Facebook event, or it will be on our YouTube channel, and it will also be in blog posts. Okay, here's a great one about the recommendations and hard limits that we have. So I love the question about Pinterest being a search engine. This is from May. At what point do the pins in the Smart Loop become spam suspicious? And we'll ask the other part of the question in a minute.
I think Steve was
asking is, are we putting people at risk of spamming and getting suspended because of Smart Loop?
So we actually have built-in safeguards to actually prevent that from happening. So like I think back to what I was saying earlier, part of working with Pinterest is deciding like how often should you actually reshare your content. And we actually, the reason why we also have recommendations as far as how often to pin when you create your loop is to make sure that this doesn't happen. Like if you follow our recommendations, choose one of those options, or even like as you use our advanced settings to choose like, okay, well, I don't want to pin 3 times a day. I maybe want to try 2 times a day or 4 times a day. As you make those adjustments too, we'll also tell you here are the results of you making that decision. And at some point, we'll also put in some safeguards to say like, hey, like this setting might actually cause you to share more often than you would expect. And so we automatically actually prevent you from doing that. So every setting that's in Smart Loop right now is actively meant to prevent that from happening. And I think on your end, as like someone using the Smart Loop, it's really important to choose the content that you really think is going to resonate with your audience instead of like taking an entire board of content and then just continually putting it out there.
Excellent. Okay. All right. Here's the other part of that question. I love this part. How often should we go in and change the board and or description?
Yeah, great question. So I think sort of to what you said earlier, like Elisa, you were saying that maybe like give it one time through your loop and sort of really make sure that you've been able to see how that pin does across all the places that could where you could engage your audience. So you get a better sense, like holistically, here are all the places I could have pinned it. I've now pinned it, and now you can sort of reflect on like what's done well or not. And for some people, that might mean checking in every 2 or 3 months. Once it's gone through all the boards that it's meant to go through, or longer, depending on your cycle. But definitely, like I think going out to each of the boards would be a really great way to get a sense of how it's doing.
Okay. So something I thought we might be able to do is when you set your frequency, when you're setting up your smart loop, you'll be able to see how long that loop will take. So how long it will take each pin to go to each board. So maybe that's 3 months. Next time I do one, and every time I do it, it gets a little better. My first one was a disaster. I had to redo the whole thing. But we have a lot more resources to help you do it right the first time now. I was just playing around. But if it says it takes 3 months for them to all go through, I want to set a reminder on my Google Calendar to go look at whatever loop that is and analyze it and change up the description so that next time it goes out, it's a little bit fresher. So maybe some different hashtags, some different keywords in the description. And then, of course, analyzing the repin per pin rate. That's my new resolution.
Yeah, and actually, one of the things that we're going to be working on very soon is actually sending out emails that will tell you like how your loops are doing. So, sort of to your point earlier, like I think like we want to make coming back into Smart Loop and checking your content as seamless as possible. So I think having these emails go tell you, hey, like you don't have to go into a Smart Loop dashboard. Here's like all the pertinent information that you need to like figure out how things are doing. So once we have that email sending out, you won't need that calendar reminder, hopefully. But a really great idea right now to make sure that you check in every so often.
Awesome. Oh, Melissa says that she's been using Smart Loop for a few months and she loves having all her pins organized. And the best part is being able to edit descriptions and hashtags at any time. Yeah,
I agree. I think especially for people who are using the pin inspector to do that before, having all of that content in one page in one loop is really helpful to do, like, to see maybe which hashtags are performing best for you.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Excellent. So we had a question. Oh, Libby is appreciative of board rules.
Yeah.
Group boards are important for you. Yeah. Yeah. So is interval pinning going away? What is interval pinning, first of all? Because Katie wants to know if it's going to stick around.
Interval pinning is basically when you take one pin and you schedule it to multiple boards and you set up an interval of maybe 1 day or 1 week, whatever you like, to put in between those boards. And no, that's not going away. You'll still have that option.
So what's your recommendation? Like, would you use the interval pin to get your pin to all the relevant boards and put it in Smart Loop at the same time? Or how do you suggest people do that with new content?
I've been recommending to people, especially with new content, since it's important to get to the most relevant board first, from what I understand from Elisa, my Pinterest teacher. So adding it to an interval first and seeing how it performs, checking in the pin inspector to see how it's going, and then adding it to a loop. I think that's one way to do it. But Elisa, I think, are you adding things to loops and then checking in on the analytics in loops?
Yeah. You know what? I'm actually doing both. Okay. So, and this is going to be a matter of personal opinion, right? So I'm putting it, I pin it right to the most relevant board first because I want Pinterest to get that signal right away from me as the content creator. This is what this pin is about. So please, distribute accordingly. But then I do want it to get to all the relevant boards pretty quickly. So I will set up interval pinning. But because of my brain and my lack of memory, I will also put it in Smart Loop. at the same time, because I'm not going to remember, oh, my interval for that blog post is done in 10 days. I'm not going to remember that. So I'm going to put it in Smart Loop because the spacing of the Smart Loop schedule is such that, I mean, I guess it could happen that it would go out twice in one day, but it seems somewhat unlikely that that would actually happen. So I'm doing both at once. Is that bad?
Yeah, actually, it's not bad. So I think like one of the settings that we have in Smart Loop is to make sure that the same pin, it can go to a different board, but we have like a minimum spacing of 1 day. And so like we actively prevent you from pinning the same pin more than once in a given day. So we already have that built in, and you can also adjust that. So if you feel that it'd be better to have it every 3 days or 5 days, totally adjustable. And when we first start with the recommendation, we'll choose one that we think works best for the content that you've chosen.
Cool. So here's another thing that I've had a little challenge wrapping my head around, and I bet other people have as well. When you add new content to a loop, the Smart Loop will kind of prioritize that newly added content. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
Once the content gets in there, there's this round robin thing that I hear about. What are you talking about?
Stephen, I'm going to let you take that one. You're way more hands-on creating that than I was.
Yeah, for sure. So like, I think one of the things that we really wanted to build into Smart Loop is to build a natural cadence for your pins to get out there. And we don't want you to ever look like an automated bot. We want to make sure that your pins have a great amount of spacing. We want to make sure that every pin gets like an even amount of distribution. And so we introduced this concept called round robin, which will essentially, if you have, let's say 10 pins in your loop, we'll go through and pin at least one of every version of that pin of your 10 pins first before coming back and reposting the first pin to a second board, for example. And then we'll also make sure that we choose different boards as we pin those 10 pins so that there's not only an even distribution of your pins, but also an even distribution of the boards that they're going out to. So that way, you're never oversharing the same pin to the same board, or you're never like sharing too frequently to the same board. Like round robin is meant to like spread it out in both ways.
Okay. Cool. So Emmeline wants to know, what is the ideal number of pins to add to a loop?
It's one of those tough questions. Stephen, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not sure that there is an actual ideal number. I think it depends on how you want to organize your loops and how many loops you want to manage total. So some people might get pretty granular with like how niche their loops are. Some people might be more broad, but I don't think there is an ideal number.
Yeah, like I think you're absolutely right there. Like I think. Yeah, I think it all depends like on and like everyone has like their own unique case. So for example, like if you've been blogging for many years, or you have a ton of content, then you will naturally just have more great content that you want to get through. And that also could mean that you are able to pin a lot more per day. So for example, you might pin up to 30 times, 40 times a day, versus someone that just started maybe a year ago, maybe only has enough content to pin 10 times a day. And so I think from that perspective, there's not really like an ideal number in that case, but it's more so like how much content do you feel like your audience really enjoys of what you have? And as you add more followers, or as you see more exposure on Pinterest, you can always add more content or tweak that going forward.
Yeah, Molly brought up a great point about how you want to organize your loops. So like in managing Tailwind's loops, I have a loop for Pinterest content that Tailwind wrote, Instagram content that Tailwind wrote, e-commerce content that Tailwind wrote. So it's by subject, so that way I can add in the boards that are relevant for those topics. I tend to add in as many boards as could possibly be relevant, because what you can do is when you add all your pins into your loop, you can go through them and say, oh, well, this one doesn't really belong on this board, right? And so you just take it out just to make sure everything is going to relevant boards. But you'll get a feel for it. And if you set up a loop, are you stuck with it that way forever?
No, definitely not. Yeah. Yeah, like
Okay.
Elisa said, you can go in and you can remove boards from individual pins. You can remove pins altogether. You can actually go into an individual pin on a loop and change which loop it's in. So it's super customizable.
Yes, I thought I was going to have to start from scratch. And Molly's like, no, you don't have to. So easy. If you set one up and you feel like, oh, this is terribly organized, I don't like it at all, it's very easy. I wouldn't recommend you delete it if you have a lot of great content in there. Just move it to a different loop, just because it's so much easier. It's already right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Jean Miller would like it if, and I don't know if we can do this. It might be something you have to try, but she wants to know if we can give an example of numbers. So if we put 10 pins in a loop and choose 3 boards, so that's 30 Smart Loop posts. How many times a day should you choose, and how long to wait until a pin goes to the same board?
Yeah, and actually, this is a really great question, and that's actually part of why, like, one of the favorite features that Elisa was asking me earlier about was like to take some of these questions and just automatically answer them for you. So as you create your loop, we'll actually tell you here are 2 options that depending on like how you want to organize your schedule, and you just choose one of them, and it will basically answer that question for you, and it's personalized to the types of the amount of content that you're trying to loop.
Yeah. And you can try one and then you can pause it and try a different way and then pause it and then get an idea for how it might work and which way you like the best. I'm seeing a lot of questions asking if Smart Loop is only available for the annual plan. Can you use it on monthly?
You can definitely use Smart Loop on a monthly plan.
Awesome. Okay. And a question, this kind of has to do with Smart Loop. Are hashtags used on Pinterest like they are on Instagram?
In general, yes. I don't know if the question means like, is it the same as Instagram? But yes, you can use hashtags on Pinterest. And I think the last time I checked our blog by Elisa, the recommendation is just to sort of add them to the end of descriptions. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So it is really similar because on Pinterest, it's chronological. So if you look at a hashtag search, you're going to see it. Like the first one was pinned 2 minutes ago, and it goes down from there. Right. So I think it's a little different from Instagram, but it's the same effect. So if you click on a hashtag, it will bring up a feed of other related content. So that's a great way to freshen up your Smart Loop posts, is to change out hashtags and see if you can get the engagement up even more. Okay, we have questions about some timing on things. Jen wants to know when that bundle plan will be available.
I'm not sure. Steven?
Yeah, actually momentarily. Yeah, the reason like we're throwing the launch party is to announce both the launch of Smart Loop and also the bundle as well. So that should be available momentarily. I think it should be actually available now, but it should be definitely available by the time the Facebook Live is over.
I'm expecting to hear a big noise when it happens. I expect the gongs to go off. Marjorie has a question about board rules. If she has 3 loops, will the board rules apply across all 3 loops?
Yes. So board rules are global and they apply across all of your loops. The only thing they won't apply to is anything that's scheduled in your general queue, but they'll apply to all of your loops.
Okay, cool. Oh, I've seen this one before in Facebook groups. Is there a minimum amount of pins I should have before I start using Smart Loop?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I would say no. I think if you have content that you think is great, you're getting a lot of engagement on, and that you think, will be engaged with repeatedly, I think throw it in a loop and keep track of it. And yeah, I don't think there's a minimum amount.
Yeah, and our recommendations will handle loops of all sizes. So you can have 1 pin, you can have 10 pins, you can have 50 pins, and it will also create recommendations personalized to the amount of content you're looping.
Okay. Kind of a little technical question, but how do you remove, because we've been talking about doing this, how do you remove a pin in a loop once you set it up?
Yeah, so if you click on your loop name over on the left-hand side of your Smart Loop dashboard, just go to find that pin. If you hover over the pin image, you'll see a little trash can icon in the top right corner, and you just click that and it's going.
Nice. And Megan is saying it's so easy to add pins to Smart Loop. It is so easy. You can do it when you're setting up Smart Loop, but then every time you create new content, if you use a Tailwind extension to schedule, the option is there to add it to Tribes, to add it to Smart Loop. It's just,
Yeah.
I agree. Thank you, Megan. It's so easy. So Melissa Meganson is hovering, and she has been helping out in the comments. Thank you very much. There are a couple questions that I probably missed. What are you seeing come up that we can answer?
So I think a big thing that keeps coming up is the pricing and when this will be going live and where you will be able to find it in the dashboard.
Ooh, okay. Okay.
Okay, so
Yeah, so it's a lot.
What was the first one? Pricing.
Pricing, yeah. So in general for Smart Loop, you can find pricing for the power-ups in your Smart Loop dashboard. If you click on this little green button that's underneath the number of Smart Loop posts you already have, and it says, I believe it says get more Smart Loop posts. You can click on that and find pricing there. There's several different power-up options, or you can go to your account settings and find options there, the same pricing list of power-ups. And then I think the other one was when it's going live, and the answer was momentarily from Steven. So, oh yeah.
Yeah, just in time.
I was brought a gong just now.
I just brought us the gong.
Okay, another one that I think would be great just to do a generic overview of what you guys have just talked about is top tips on how to change the descriptions and evaluate your Smart Loop pins for what's working.
Hey, Molly.
Okay, so my answer is probably too broad, so feel free to sort of fill in some gaps. But in terms of like just checking it out, I think, like I said earlier, so a lot of people who really get into Tailwind Analytics are used to doing this in the pin inspector, but Smart Loop, I think it makes it a lot easier. So you can click on a loop. In the middle of your page, you're going to see all of the pins that are in that loop, and directly under each pin image, you're going to see analytics. So comparing all of them together, like Steven said earlier, it might be the same piece of content with a different description and different image. It's all right there in the dashboard. So just keeping track of that as best as possible. It's not a great answer, but I mean, really just staying on top of it. Maybe, once a week or once a month, checking out, what's actually performing well for me, and then tweaking your strategy from there, even just changing up the description or adding different hashtags, stuff like that.
Excellent.
Okay, and finally, I think it would be great to go over the mechanics of Smart Loop. How do we add a pin? How do we get our best performing content into our loops? Just how does that happen? How do we create that loop?
Yeah, so I'll do my best without sharing my screen, but there's, I think, 3 different ways to add a pin to a loop. So first, if you want to create a loop, you will go to, there's the left-hand navigation in your Tailwind dashboard. You're going to click the little megaphone that says Publisher, and then click on Smart Loop. It used to say beta, and now it'll say new because we're launched. Yay! But from there, you'll see an option that says Create a New Loop. And so this is one of the ways to add pins to a loop. You'll set the loop up with a title and what boards you want to add, but then to add pins, you'll use our bulk import feature. So basically you can select a board, or you can, there's lots of different ways to filter it. You can choose to only look at pins that are from your website. You can, like I said, select an individual board. You can click on the pins there. Or you can go to your pin inspector. And on your pin inspector, next to each pin, you'll see an option to add to Tribes and now to add to Smart Loop. And then also, if you're using the extension, so if it like a normal, just using the extension to schedule a pin, you'll see the option right underneath Add to Tribes to add to Smart Loop. So that's another way to do that. And in terms of getting your best performing content, I would recommend just going to the pin inspector, sorting by highest repins, and you can add it straight from there.
Oh, cool. Yeah,
I like actually our bulk importer also includes something similar. So you can actually sort by the highest repins on a given board as you're creating your loop. So it's built into multiple places.
Oh, we have a question about seasonal loops from MJ. Hi, MJ. If we want to loop a seasonal pin like a promotion of a product in a specific amount of time, and after the promotion, I will edit the description. Does the existing pin with a promotion description automatically remove, or does it update with a new description? Oh, I think she's asking if we edit pins which are already on Pinterest, which no, we do not.
Yeah.
But something that comes up with the seasonal loops is, and I think this comes from perhaps the setup process. Will you have to restart it next year, or will it remember for you and do it for you?
The beauty of seasonal loops is that it'll just restart next year, exactly when you told it to. So there's no like going in and restarting it manually. It'll just go on its own.
Okay. Cool. Oh, and Marjorie's loving Smart Loop.
Yeah, and actually one great way, if you haven't started with Smart Loop yet, is we have an upcoming holiday season, and I know all of you are busy getting set up and even getting your pins scheduled out for that holiday. But if you start with Smart Loop today, you can do that work this holiday season, get that loop set up, and next Christmas or next holiday season, you're already all set up, and it'll automatically start pinning for you.
That's pretty handy. Okay, so Melissa, did we cover most of the major questions?
I think we did.
Okay.
Great job, guys. Yay.
Yay, thank you. Thank you, Molly, for coming on. And Stephen, yes. We will go through the comments and answer any that we didn't get to live, but thank you everybody for being here. We have a lot of questions about the bundle. We'll cover that in the comments as well. So again, Smart Loop is live. The bundle is live as well, or
yes.
will
it?
Yeah. It's all live. Awesome. Okay, we have reason to celebrate. So I understand there might be some Smart Loop cookies in Oklahoma City somewhere.
They might be gone now.
We might have celebrated early.
It's a good thing we're hula hooping. So thanks everybody for being here. And again, if you have Smart Loop questions, make sure you contact Molly at help. So that's your CS button. Or you can, what's the best way to email about Smart Loop questions, Molly?
help@tailwindapp.com.
Okay, we'll be looking for those, but hopefully we gave you something to get started with. And really the best way to understand it is to just go ahead and do it. If you don't like the first one, start over, but it won't take long for you to get the hang of it. So thanks everybody for being here, and take care.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.